And so I'm sure obviously you know who Charlie Kirk is. I mean, anybody who doesn't live, and I don't agree with him on everything, but where kind of what he said something that really just struck out to me is everybody should have equal access, but we can't have a guaranteed or an equal outcome necessarily, right? But everybody should have that chance to push themselves to the furthest spot they can go. Obviously, we can't guarantee that you're going to be the next Albert Einstein, but we should, and we should all have access, and where I think a lot of it and this again, this is like, I always tell everybody, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's just kind of how it goes. The loudest voice in the room, even if they don't get what they want, gets the most attention. So you have like certain extremists out there that go, oh well, they're saying this is anti-white or this is anti-this, and then certain media people will pick up on it, and then they do, the clickbait, boom, 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 boom. Next thing you know, 10 billion views, and you've got a whole nation believing one thing. And that's kind of how it goes. And it's usually, I have found that 90% of people I've ever talked to from academia are not what you would see if you turned on Fox News. 20 something years ago, I'd have been like, yeah, Fox News is okay to watch. They have some, balanced people on there. But now, I mean, it's no different than the very people they hate, just the opposite side. It's all about the glorification of getting you riled up. And it's, and I wouldn't even say I'm necessarily like anti DEI, right? I'm more of like, hey, how do we get it to kind of go from like your end, right? We focus on the access and outcomes, but not just virtue signaling, right? Because a lot of people that is something that a lot of people want, whether you're left or right? They want their core thing and I just, it's I'm sure you know who Bill Maher is, right? I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
Bill Maher, obviously, very long time hardcore. He says himself, "I was a hardcore lefty." But when they started trying to blend the education, the politics, and then their stance on this, and everybody, like not necessarily academia, but like the people who say they quote unquote want to say they support it. But I think they support more of indoctrination. Is not the word I'm looking for. More of a do as we say mentality, not necessarily from you guys, but from people who view DI a certain way, whether you're left or right. And and he pretty much said that's what caused people. That's what's hurting everybody. He said, things have went too far, for the American people to be like, okay, hey. But I think a lot of it when they're saying it went too far with DEI is the view has went too far. How the public views it has went too far. Not what it actually is. Now there's some companies out there I have seen, I can't remember the exact references that have definitely had some very I won't say like questionable, but definitely some, well, I can see why somebody would get upset positions, but in general, like what you're doing is it's about what actually DI is supposed to be for, not what
Well,
some people morphed it into.
I appreciate you saying that, Joe, because I actually agree with everything you just said. So, and what I mean by that is, I think that part of the reason that there's significant backlash against DEI is that there's a significant misunderstanding and sometimes a misapplication of it. So, what I've spent my life studying it. So, I'm not. I come to this with a deep understanding and passion of what systems change looks like for a person, and then also an understanding. Just to be candid, I think we've spent a lot of time focusing on words instead of outcomes. And at the end of the day, the outcomes are where true equity can show itself. And that doesn't mean that everybody, to your point, not everybody has to become a doctor, but everybody should be able to somehow, institutions, let me rephrase that, institutions should aspire to have everybody get across the stage. That doesn't, the graduation stage. We still have to have rigor. Some people won't cut it, but that doesn't mean that, you mentioned you have a child with autism, for instance. A child with autism has different needs than somebody who doesn't. I have a daughter who's dyslexic. She has different needs than others. Everybody has a story. Everybody has deficits because of that story. And we need to do our best to address those in a way that is rigorous and not just about, I like your term virtue signaling. It is not about virtue signaling. It's about getting those students to where they need to be at the end of the day. And that requires nuance.